Congratulations! You just became the owner of an acre of the moon. It cost you $20 with a certificate and GPS coordinates. But that certificate is legally worthless. Visiting your acre would cost millions. Over $1 million per kilo to land. That $20 bought the cheapest part of an impossible shipping problem. We'll look at the treaty gap the sellers used, the private companies getting NASA's billion-dollar payments, the shipping math, and a wild finale. But before you spend a cent on moon architects, let's see what the people running the moon economy are doing today. Now, let's talk about how that certificate industry even got started. In 1967, at the peak of the space race, the big space-traveling countries, both the United States, the Soviet Union, and others, signed a treaty that said no nation can claim the moon as its own territory. Think of it as a no colonial flags agreement. They didn't want the Cold War to extend to the moon, but the treaty says nations can't claim it. It never mentions a private person. Turns out a few clever business people spotted a gap. If governments can't own the moon, maybe an individual can. They started selling acres of moonland, arguing that the treaty's silence meant it was still possible for private property. But remember, this entire lunar rock, at least on paper, is yours. Even if that certificate had any legal force, the cost to actually reach your patch would ruin you financially before you ever set foot on it. We'll get to the brutal shipping numbers soon. But first, let's look at why the Own the Moon business has been running for decades, and why it never needed a real court to survive. No court on Earth has ever recognized one of these certificates. If NASA builds a base on your acre tomorrow, you have no legal claim at all. You can frame the certificate, but you can't enforce anything. So why does the industry keep going? Because nobody's actually buying land. They're buying a fun gift. $20 for a fun story you can put on your wall. Over the decades, the total sales are maybe a few tens of millions of dollars, a tiny amount compared to the real money flowing to the moon. So if the land itself is legally worthless, who's actually spending serious money on the moon? And what are they buying? The answer is NASA, and what it's buying is the hardest delivery service in existence. Soft landing means setting a machine down in one piece, still working. It has to escape Earth's gravity, cross 250,000 miles, and land upright on rough ground with no air to slow down. It's so difficult that for decades, only governments even attempted it. Then, a few years ago, NASA decided to stop being the builder and become a customer. Instead of designing every lander itself and paying companies for every tiny piece, it launched the CLPS program. Commercial Lunar Payload Services. A lander is the vehicle that touches down on the moon. Payloads are the instruments or cargo a spacecraft carries. The pitch was simple. We'll pay you a fixed price if you successfully deliver our instruments to the moon. Succeed, and you get paid. Fail, and you get nothing. The company takes all the risk. A single successful landing contract can be worth a few $100 million. And that's before they sell spare cargo space to other space agencies, universities, or even corporations. The real companies are Intuitive Machines, the first private company to soft land on the moon in early 2024, plus Astrobotic and Firefly Aerospace. These are the actual FedExes of the moon, and NASA is their biggest customer. Pay attention. Soon, this whole delivery business is yours to run. And this is where it gets strange. What does a $100 million mission actually buy you? Let's look at the math, because the shipping cost becomes almost impossible to believe. Imagine a lander carrying a couple of 100 kilograms of science gear. The whole mission might cost around $100 million or more, but most of that money pays for the lander itself, which is left behind on the surface and never returns. So when you divide the costs across the relatively tiny amount of cargo that actually gets delivered, you're paying well over $1 million just to place a single kilogram on the moon. Return to your $20 acre. Say you want to plant a 2-kilogram flag on that exact spot. The delivery alone, just the shipping, could cost you roughly the price of a nice house. The dirt was the cheap part. The delivery is the nightmare. It's like an upside-down postal service. The lighter your package, the higher the shipping cost per gram, because the entire delivery van has to be carried all the way there and then is left there. There's no return trip, no dividing the cost with anyone else. That flag is on its own. But that brutal shipping math comes with an even bigger problem. The delivery companies only get paid if they actually land. That fixed price contract means no partial payment. Astrobotic's Peregrine lander in early 2024 suffered a fuel leak shortly after launch. The craft never got close to a landing, so NASA didn't owe them a cent of the roughly $108 million contract. They lost almost all the revenue from that mission all at once. For a small private company, a single failed landing can destroy years of work and threaten its entire future. This isn't a steady delivery service where a broken truck gets a replacement sent out. The FedEx of the moon can disappear overnight if one vehicle breaks down. But those small scientific deliveries are just one lane of the moon's delivery economy. When the goal is to send astronauts instead of instruments, the price tag jumps by roughly 10 times as much. Under the Artemis program, NASA is planning to send people back to the moon. To get them to the surface, it needs a human lander, the vehicle that takes astronauts from lunar orbit down to the surface and back up. NASA awarded SpaceX around $4.2 billion to develop and deliver that human lander. Blue Origin, the space company founded by Jeff Bezos, also got a crew lander contract. Artemis is expected to cost around $90 billion or more over many decades. That money goes to companies building rockets, spacesuits, habitats, power systems, and surface supply systems. So the moon's real-world economy today is essentially this large amount of public money paid to a handful of private rocket companies. Your $20 certificate is tiny compared to these numbers. The land is free, the transportation is the entire business. Which brings us to the bigger pattern hiding behind all of this. The moon is being treated less like a territory and more like an extreme conditions project site. Think of a remote oil platform far out at sea. Nobody cares who owns the ocean floor. They pay for the platform, the supply ships, the power, the communications. That's exactly what's happening on the moon. In a gold rush, the people who almost always got rich weren't the miners. They were the ones selling picks, shovels, and transport. The moon's shovels are landing services, power systems, and surface communications. The gold being mined isn't even gold. It's government science and exploration. Get this, US law now says a private company can own the resources it takes out of the moon. The ice, the minerals, the rocks, but it still cannot own the ground itself. So you can own a moon rock, but not the dirt it came from. The value is in the thing you bring back, not the patch you stand on. So if you're still holding that certificate, the land is free, the shipping is everything, and the only stuff worth owning is whatever you can pick up and carry home. Now, if you really want to stretch this pick and shovel logic into the future, the one thing that could turn the moon from a government project site into a self-sustaining economy is water ice. Satellites have found ice locked in permanently shadowed craters at the poles. If a company could mine that ice and split it into hydrogen and oxygen, you'd have rocket fuel made on the moon, right next to the payloads that need it. Suddenly, the moon becomes a deep space gas station. The delivery companies you already own, Intuitive Machines, Astrobotic, Firefly, could evolve from taxi services into fuel suppliers. The market would shift from shipping government science gear to fueling missions to Mars, because every ship heading further out would fill up at the lunar station. But here's the catch. The technology to mine, process, and store that ice in large amounts doesn't exist yet. Building the mining infrastructure would cost far more than even the Artemis lander contracts. So for now, the only thing being hauled back from that ice is the hope that someday the moon pays for itself. The moon's entire economy today has one paying customer: NASA, which is funded by the public. Without NASA's demand for lunar science and exploration, there would be no delivery market yet. A few other national space agencies, like Japan's space agency and the European Space Agency, are starting to buy rides. And someday there might be commercial payloads, a lunar data center, a deep space telescope, maybe even a tourism payload. But right now, the sole buyer is the US government. If government budgets shift, if Artemis gets reduced, or if the political will to spend on the moon fades, the delivery companies lose their main customer, whose spending makes the whole thing work. The moon goes back to being a dead rock with no customers. You don't just need the technology to land, you need someone willing to pay. And for now, that someone is only the public. So the $20 certificate and the $100 million delivery contracts are the same story from two ends. One end is a charming legal trick that sells fantasies for a small amount of money. The other end is a brutal engineering economy, where the real money flows to the companies that solve the hardest transportation problem in the solar system. And the only entity paying the real bills is the taxpayer. The certificate is a charming story. The delivery fee is the truth. Alright, you've seen everything the real owners are already doing. NASA pays billions for deliveries, private companies get paid, and the only thing worth money is the ride. You're not going to be less. You could even declare yourself the Lunar Zoning Authority. Since no one can own the ground, but people land things on it, you can announce a landing fee for every lander on your acre. The fee must be paid in advance, with no refunds, and late payments at extra interest, counted in moon cycles. Just put a small automated invoice into the Artemis lander's navigation computer and wait. Or you could sell a premium version of the special visit. For a modest fee, say all the money a small country makes in a year, you'll arrange for a future commercial lander to carry a 2-kilogram flag with the buyer's name on it and plant it on their exact coordinates. The basic flag is included. A carbon fiber pole and gold leaf flag are premium extras. The waiting list is a century long, but that only builds the mystery. And since you can't sell the ground itself, you sell the experience of a specific shadow cast by a specific rock at a specific lunar sunrise. Half the moon's surface is in permanent shadow or blinding light. You sell the rights to exclusive shadow rent zones to high-end hotels back on Earth, who sell authentic lunar shadow time to their guests. The marketing writes itself: own nothing, experience everything, pay annually. And if anyone challenges your claim, just remind them, you've got a certificate with gold lettering and they don't. Now go frame it.